All right, let's just jump right in. We're on the brink of a massive transportation revolution, but it comes with a question that feels like it belongs in a philosophy textbook. But here's the twist. The answer isn't going to be an essay. It's going to be lines of code. So picture this. You're just relaxing in your brand new self-driving car. Everything's great. Then, bam, the brakes fail. Right in front of you, a group of people walks into the street. Your car has to make a split-second decision. Stay straight and hit those people, or swerve hard into a concrete barrier, which means, it's probably over for you. What do you program it to do? It's a really tough question, isn't it? But it's one we absolutely have to figure out. And here's the thing. This might sound super futuristic, but the core of this problem, it's actually ancient. You've probably heard of it. The good old trolley problem. For decades, this was just stuff for philosophers to argue about. But now, it's not a game anymore. We have to literally program a definitive answer into the cars we're about to put on the street.
All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this beast. First, we'll see what everyone's saying online. Then we'll bring in the pros, the philosophers. From there, we'll check out this huge global experiment that tried to find some answers. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty legal stuff, like who pays when things go wrong. And finally, we'll wrap up by looking at what all this means for the future.
Okay, let's get into it. And where else would we start but the internet? Yep, we're diving into a really interesting debate from Reddit on their Change My View page. So this user, Gemini999, basically lays out this argument. Hey, I bought the car. It's mine. Shouldn't its main job be to protect me? And, that's a really straightforward consumer-first point of view. It kind of makes sense on a gut level, doesn't it? And that really sets up the core conflict here, right? You've got the passenger's view. It's my property. The company owes me protection. But then you have the pedestrian side. Wait a minute. Why is your life worth more just because you bought a fancy car? You're the one who put that machine on the road, creating the risk. I was just walking. And that leads us to this great point from another user, the reasonable man _. They bring up this legal idea called strict liability. And basically it's this. If you're the one introducing something potentially dangerous into the world, say a self-driving car, then you're the one who has to accept the consequences if it goes wrong. Simple as that. You created the risk, you own the responsibility. Another user, Whitekeep, adds another layer to this, consent. Think about it. When you get in that car, you're basically agreeing to some level of risk. You might even click I agree on some terms and conditions. But the person on the sidewalk, they never signed up for that. They didn't consent to be part of this whole ethical equation. So you've got one person who's in on the risk and another who's just an innocent bystander. Okay, so just when this whole moral back and forth is getting really intense, someone throws a huge wrench in the works. They ask, what if the car doesn't make a moral choice at all? This is a fantastic point from a user named Natha105, who brings in the engineering angle. Their argument is that the car isn't thinking in terms of good or bad. It's just running code. The logic is going to be super simple, like, obstacle there? Okay, don't go there. It doesn't see a person or a mailbox. It just sees a blob it needs to avoid. All this heavy ethical weight we're putting on it, maybe it's all in our heads. Now that engineering take is really compelling, right? The idea that it's all just amoral code. But here's the catch. Someone still has to write that code. Someone has to decide which rule wins when two rules crash into each other. So that initial choice is still an ethical one, which is the perfect time to bring in the experts. Let's leave Reddit behind and see what the philosophers have to say. Okay, first up, we have the heavyweight, Immanuel Kant. His whole deal is called Kantian ethics, and the big idea is something called the categorical imperative. The simple version? It's all about rules, not results. Some things are just always wrong, no matter what. And the biggest rule of all is you can never, ever use a person as a mere tool to get something you want, not even if it's for a greater good. Now, let's hop over to a completely different way of thinking with Confucian ethics. This isn't about one-size-fits-all rules. It's all about keeping society running smoothly, maintaining harmony. It's built on virtues like Li, which is basically social etiquette and doing things the proper way, and Ren, which is all about compassion and relationships. It's much more about context and community than rigid laws. So what happens when we apply these to our car crash? This is where it gets really cool. For a Kantian, swerving is a huge no-no. Why? Because you're using the pedestrian as a tool, a human shield basically, to save the passenger. That breaks the #1 rule. so the car can't swerve. Now look at Confucian ethics. It gets to the exact same conclusion, but from a totally different angle. Swerving and killing someone on a sidewalk, that destroys social order. That Li we talked about, it breaks the trust we all have that sidewalks are safe. So to keep the peace, the car can't swerve. How wild is that? Two completely different philosophies, same exact answer. Okay, so we've got the Reddit hot takes and the ancient philosophical wisdom. But what do people today, all around the world, actually think? Well, lucky for us, some researchers at MIT decided to find out with one of the biggest experiments of its kind ever. They built this online game, this platform called the Moral Machine, and it just threw scenario after scenario at people. The response? It was absolutely massive. We're talking 40 million, that's right, 40 times million decisions logged from over 2 million people in hundreds of countries. And just look at this map. It really shows you the insane reach of this thing. This wasn't some little poll. It was truly global. And what's so cool about this data is that it gives us a real shot at answering that huge question. Does humanity have a shared set of ethics for this stuff? Or does morality literally change when you cross a border? And it turns out the answer is, well, it's a bit of both. There were definitely a few things almost everyone agreed on. 3 big ones stood out everywhere. Save humans over animals, save more lives instead of fewer, and save the young over the old. So hey, we've got some common ground. But, and this is a big but, once you get past those 3 rules, things started to look very different depending on where you are in the world. The data basically sorted itself into 3 big groups. You had a Western cluster that was really focused on saving the most people possible. Then an Eastern cluster that put a higher value on saving the elderly and pedestrians, and a Southern cluster with its own unique mix. The big takeaway? There's no single universal answer. Okay, philosophy is great. Data is fascinating. But let's get real for a second. When one of these cars actually crashes, the first question isn't going to be about Kant. It's going to be, who pays for this? Who's getting sued? Let's talk about liability. And right now, the legal world is basically split down the middle. One camp says the driver's responsible. We've seen this in court cases involving systems like Tesla's autopilot, where judges basically said, you were supposed to be paying attention. But the other camp says, no way, it has to be the car company. You see this in places like Germany, which put the responsibility on the manufacturers. And you've even got Volvo coming out and saying, yep, if our car is in self-driving mode and crashes, it's on us. Their logic is that this will push them to build the safest car possible. And let's be clear, this is not a what-if scenario anymore. By early 2024, there were around 42 deaths linked to incidents with Tesla's autopilot feature. So yeah, this isn't some trolley problem in a textbook. These are real people, which is why figuring out who's responsible is so important. So we've covered a lot of ground, right? From a single Reddit post to global ethics to messy lawsuits. But as we peer into the future, you realize the problem is about to get even trickier. Because deciding who the car should hit, that's actually just the beginning. There's this idea that experts are starting to worry about called the responsibility gap. See, right now, AI follows rules we give it. But the next generation of AI, it's going to learn on its own. It'll adapt and change in ways the original programmer never even imagined. So what happens when that AI causes a crash? Who's to blame then? The person who wrote the initial code, the owner, or is the AI itself responsible? It opens up a whole new can of worms. And all of this brings us back to one final massive question. We know from that Moral Machine experiment that different cultures have different ideas about what's right. So what do we do? Do we try to create one single universal ethical code for every self-driving car on Earth? Or do we build cars whose morals literally change at the border? The answer we choose won't just shape our roads. It's going to define our entire future with machines that think.